Good afternoon. It is 26th, the day after Halloween. I don't know where you live. I live in central Suffolk, and which is way out from where just about everybody else seems to live in this particular class. And so I'm smiling because I don't know what happened, how you folks made out, but I will tell you that we had zero trick-or-treaters yesterday. I live on a fairly good sized piece of property. I'm a little bit off the street, but it's not as though I'm a million miles off. It's maybe 100 feet off the street. And we had all kinds of candy out there and uh, ready to distribute to all the little eager children. But every year there's fewer and fewer kids, and this year there were none. And I'm bothered by that. A number of reasons. One of the reasons being that it means that Richard will probably eat the candy, and Richard's not supposed to eat the candy. So if you put a lobster over here and you put a Snickers in over here, I would probably eat the Snickers every time because I like lobster, but I love Snickers. So enough said. So I hope everybody came through a nice and safe Halloween. And I think this coming weekend, we push the clocks back or push them forward. I never remember which. And then it'll get dark even earlier than it's getting lately, as it is as we speak. And enough said. And since I'm smiling and bantering with you, even though I have nobody to specifically banter with, I do feel better, thank heavens, and thank you for your good wishes all the way across and your patience. Um, I feel better. I did get a little tired. I still get tired. Um, but that may be because I'm just an old guy. But I think it's still from whatever it was I had. But thank heavens, things seem to be getting better, and we'll move on. Anyway, enough said about that. We move on, and a few things to talk to. None of them are well, I'm talking too much. Let me just get going. Okay, first of all, I have all of your assignments from they were due on the 30th, except for yeah, I think I have them all right now, and I've graded them all. It was 10 points. Um, if you didn't get 10 points, you have and I gave you some kind of indication of what would have made the paper a 10-point paper, which I always do. Then feel free to resubmit it. I'm totally okay with that. This is not a test. I'm trying to help you get as good at as many skills and skill sets as I can get you at. And so your response to the analyses of the entire book by way of using chapter 9 was interesting and good. You're a very thoughtful class on whole anyway. In fact, each of you is more thoughtful than the next. And enough said about that. But and it expressed itself in the papers that you submitted. So enough said about that. Now the next assignment that's due is November 20th, and that will be a faculty memo. I already described the faculty memo in the last video I put out last week, but I will come back to that. So I will certainly provide a model, and I'll certainly hold I might even do it next week, actually. I haven't decided yet. An optional office hour next week so that you can bounce ideas off me. We can get that going. But essentially, what I want to do is to give you the skill set to write a memo where you're going to enlist, draft, beg, plead, take hostage people whom from your faculty who would assist you in coming up with a change plan that you're in the process of formulating to make a change in your E&L programs wherever you may be. And there's certain components we'll need to have in that, and we'll definitely come back to that. Excuse me. I'm getting messages flying in from left and right from other things. I'm a little bit distracted. In fact, let me just answer that this way. I won't have to be bothered. think I'm recording again. I'm pretty sure I am. All right. So that'll take care of that, and on and on we go. So there's the next, and also I wanted to point out, I know when one of the students a couple of days ago was kind of confused about this, and I can understand why. There is no discussion question this week. I deliberately did not post a discussion question. The next uh, discussion question or questions are due on November 5th, which is this coming Sunday. And the reason why I did that was because I wanted you to have a look at the videos from Dr. Gonzalez so you could respond to them. Some of you have responded to them, to the first set, and most of you have not. And that's fine because they're really not due until November 5th. And I'll respond to them. I don't grade them, make a face. Forgive me for making a face. If they need to be fixed, I'll tell you. But but the way you handle discussion questions as a whole with a W in this class, it's very professional and done well. So basically, you're going to get the maximum credit unless I tell you that you're not. So don't fret about that. Please don't fret about that. And the course is going to take a turn probably after today's video. And when we're certain of that, we're going to expect a little bit more of you on the one hand and less of you on the other. Where I'm going, if you recall, you did a questionnaire that I distributed. It has to be every bit of 6 weeks ago, maybe more, where I asked for your opinions about leadership in certain senses, and I kind of categorized you, but didn't tell you how I categorized you. What's going to happen is I'm going to put you in a kind of simulation. I have a full-fledged, full-bore, all-out 6 or 7 hours, actually more than that, simulation of change. That's called alchemy, that I would love to do with this class. And I might even try to do it because there's 10 of you in a class. I could get away with that, but I don't know yet if I want to do that for your sake, not for mine. So, but I am going to put you in a kind of simulation expectation starting next week, where you're going to be playing 2 roles. One role would be as a member of one of 2 teams. One would be the world out there, and the other one would be the educational leadership team in the same community. And then you'll each play a role within those teams. One will play a superintendent, one will be a board president, one will be a principal, one will be a union president, and so forth. And then you're also going to be assigned an expertise. So the union president, for example, will be the expert on systems thinking. And that would be an educational leadership team. Her counterpart in the world out there team will be the business person. So it'll be 2 people who have that kind of expertise in systems. Another pair will have an expertise in collaborative leadership. Another pair will have a culture expertise. Another pair will be futurists, and you'll be responsible for learning those skills and interacting with each other offline. That's the difference. All right, and I'm not going to make you meet with each other. Certainly, that's not part of the expectation of the course. But there'll be an expectation in blue, probably, of the discussion questions, rather than have you stand on your head to do 2 things. But you're going to need to speak to people in your team every once in a while to make some decisions together, and then we'll move from there. And that's as much as I'll tell you about now. But that we are going to take a turn for the back part of this course, and you'll see that the case study for this course it responds to the simulation, is we align with the simulation. I'm going to probably change that a little bit to make it a little simpler, but that's the second case study. First case study being what you turned in 2 days ago, and then the other case study will be a response to the simulation, and along the way you're going to be expected to be working on the action plan design for your own change approach, and I'll figure out some ways to pull that all together in a bit. So what I want to do today is really give you some kind of meaty material, okay? One person, I think it might have been Kay, but it may have been somebody else too. I'm not sure. As I was reading your assignments yesterday and today, not sure if it was you, Kay. But at any rate, several of you commented on whether your principles were futures-based, or the school had the capacity to be futures-based as you understood Chapter 9 in the collective mindset. Remember, the futuring is part of the collective mindset. It's not the whole part. It's a piece of the collective mindset. And so now we're going to get more deeply into the futures-based change leadership because of its role, ROLE role, in change itself. And you need to learn some skills that you don't have. So today I'm going to begin to teach them to you. And I don't know who's going to play futurist or not. I don't remember who I assigned to that from that survey I gave you. But in the end, you all should kind of just get your arms around what these skills are. I'm very reluctant to give you this PowerPoint yet because, as I said, it's very long and you don't need a lot of it. Maybe I'll find a shorter one to send to you so you can. I will do that, but not today. But I'm going to walk you through some skills today, and I'm going to walk you through them kind of quickly. Do I expect you to master them today? No, not at all. But when this video is finished, you're going to be aware that there are several skill sets that go into futuring. You notice I'm bringing my fingers together because futuring is of itself a skill set, but it's dependent on collaborative leadership. It's dependent on design thinking. It's dependent on understanding culture. The things we've talked about throughout the collective mindset book. So you can't have futuring without those other pieces. But now we're going to more nearly emphasize some skills and some types of futuring that you have never seen before. You've seen pieces of them in your travels along the way, but you haven't seen them in this context. Enough said, I'm talking too much. And so we're going to share the screen as soon as I bring up. Here we go. I don't remember where we left off, so I'm starting from slide 52. Doesn't matter all that much what was one before that. No, that doesn't apply. I'm almost certain we've talked about this before, but here it comes again. Here we go. Our futures and our culture are the sum of our decisions. The culture steers your decisions. Understand that. We've been talking about that word from the beginning of the course. And you can't change that culture unless you understand what the present culture is. I may have said this before, but it's worth repeating. Every time one of my students gets a job, and I get an email from somebody, Dr. B, I'm a principal of, or I'm a superintendent, and I say the same thing every single time. And I'll hopefully say it to many of you before too much longer, and that is learn the culture. Even if you're part of that culture, even if you've been promoted up through the ranks, doesn't mean you know the culture. I'm smiling smugly. Humbly recognize that because there's issues that we respond to about what culture is that we haven't even necessarily scratched here in this particular class, at least not yet. And so you need to learn the culture. And then the more you understand the culture, the more you understand how people decide. And the more you understand how people decide, the more you can see how adaptable and open they are to change. So with that in mind, let's look at this way people decide. And I'm 99% sure I've demonstrated this to you already. But since we haven't spoken in a week or so, maybe more, here it comes again. It's a very simple left to right decision model. In a sense, it's how you decide and how I decide most everything. At the same time, it's so simple that it really is deceptively easy to misunderstand as such. I've seen research, and since most of you are teachers, you know this instinctively, but maybe not outwardly, that points out that teachers make around 300 decisions a day. Imagine that. Do you call on Johnny instead of Mary? and Mary instead of Johnny? Do you get this homework assignment instead of that homework assignment? Do you decide to ask this question versus that question? Do you ignore Mary's behavior or do you praise it? That's this kind of thing. Those are all decisions. How wearing, how erosive, how much tiring that is. And that's why you come home. I have a daughter who teaches second grade, and when she comes home, my wife is watching the children, picks them up, and then waits for my daughter to get home about 45 minutes later. And my daughter comes home. It doesn't live too far from her job, and she comes home and she's vibrating. When she comes in the house, and her daughter's, I'm saying, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." And sometimes she says, "Back off," because she hasn't yet changed her role from teacher of 25 little buzzers, okay, or back to her children. She has to remind herself what her role is because she's been making decisions all day long. I'm sure it's true for you as well. Every decision begins with facts and information. Data, that's the word you want to use. Facts, information, data, include that. And if those facts and information are the substance of and the basis for a decision that you need to make, which leads to a goal or goals. So if you say, for example, that your principal doesn't consult with her staff, that's a fact. So a goal would be to somehow show that your principal that it's important to embrace her staff, to contribute, maybe not make the final decision, but to contribute to what a decision might have to be. That doesn't apply to fire drills or some kind of emergency. Nothing like that. When we're talking about the long-term needs to align your school with it and its culture with a future that it prefers. So again, we have this data and information. It leads to a goal or to goals, plural, and it leads to choices. So one choice would be to yell at the principal. Another choice would be to never tell the principal. Third choice might be to demonstrate to the principal how this might work. This strategy might work. And then actually, if you see the arrow, you can't see it very well on this slide. You see how the arrow slides over to futuring and types of futuring, the basis for decision making. I'm going to skip over that for the moment. I'm going to go all the way over to the right side of the equation of the model and say that values and feelings, emotions, are what steer most choices. Pretty sure I told you the story about my having done a site visit for a prospective administrative candidate I had, who was working in a summer school as an administrative intern, and in a school she wasn't familiar with. So we had to place her in a different school, and she came to me. She said, "Dr. B," she says, "the principal doesn't even talk to me, let alone give me anything to do." So I said, "Okay, let me talk to him." So I go in to see him, and he was kind of, I'm stereotyping him. He was kind of an old school kind of my way or the highway, I am the king kind of principle. I think we all know those types. And he said something. He said something about how he was trying to work on the master schedule. Now, mind you, I think only one of you works in secondary. Coming up with a schedule for a secondary school is a very difficult job. By the way, a schedule, even in elementary school, is an example of the value system of the culture. Always understand that. That's a little off base, but I want to make sure you hear that. Nowadays, we have these computer programs to do the scut work and loads each student's schedule. Only does that if you give it the parameters of the values and feelings of that you want to have in there. So, for example, if you want to say that I want all my gym teachers, my PE teachers, to have the last period off, so they can get their sports equipment ready for the next day or for coaching or whichever. Well, the value system then means that you care about coaching more than about most other things. Or if you want to block out the morning schedule by saying there'll be no movement, everybody will stay in the same class for an hour and a half to read. All right, those are all values and feelings. And those are decisions that you make based on what your values tell you. But to come back to this model, again, we go back to data and we go back to goals and we go back to choices within the goals. And then we go back to what those values and feelings are. And that begins to sift out, filter your choices. Well, I don't want that to happen because I don't believe in having my coaches have the ninth period off because it jams up the rest of the schedule. All right, as a quick example. And so my choices get filtered by my values and feelings, and then I know what my if-thens are. And what we're going to concentrate on sort of quickly, you may need to run this video more than once, on the different types of futuring that there are. So really we're talking about the middle of this model right here. But don't forget these other pieces because they all fit into the puzzle. All right, so we did that. And now there are three, really more, but there are three what I call types of futuring, ing. One is pretty obvious, and that's information gathering. The type 2 is more difficult to understand when I tell you, but when you see it, you recognize it, but it's not hard at all. Except it's dependent on the quality of what kind of information you have to begin with. Type 3 is the one that's, I think, has the most value, the most difficult one to come up with and to conjure in a certain sense, and the most complicated one. And that was what we call either eco-futuring or three-dimensional futuring. So we go from information gathering to two-dimensional futuring, if-thens, to three-dimensional. My goal today is to get you through those three and maybe lead to 4 and 5, but probably not. Okay, and that's okay if we don't. I know I did this already, but let me do it one more time. Forgive me. An organization that doesn't future its practices and its skills and its dispositions has a weak systems thinking approach. They're not good at it. It's vague. They don't know how to make decisions because the systems aren't aligned with how your futures are dictating it. If you don't know how to creatively think, then you can't get rid of the old habits, and all you do is perpetuate the nonsense that you have been using for the last 10,000 years. Neither do you know how to collaborate very well, how to decide and to act together. That principle I told you about was adamant that he made all the decisions. Okay, didn't care about this collaborative leadership practice. And an organization that doesn't have the capacity to change reacts rather than proacts. One of you used that phrase in your discussion questions. Okay, so for example, if your E&L, let's just change this up a little bit. If the E&L children's, if there's a widening gap between what the E&L children are doing on in terms of achieving and learning versus the general education program, they're not narrowing, but rather they're widening, and the non E&L kids are moving way past the E&L kids, or the other way around for that matter. That's a trend you have to take a look at. And you can see that's what this is speaking to, although I'm not going to give you this PowerPoint yet, if ever. You can see where I'm taking you. And so the principal needs to come up with some ways to do it. We talked about some of this already. Essentially, we're talking about information analysis, two-dimensional thinking, if-thens, and then three-dimensional. Now, let's slow down a little bit. Information gathering is what it sounds like. None of you were probably alive when this happened. Maybe you were. Maybe you were very young. When 9/11 happened, that's 22 years ago. President Bush at the time decided he was going into Iraq. We all wanted to stop this. We wanted to capture the bin Laden and all those other good things. But a practical thing that Bush said he wanted to do was invade Iraq because Iraq supposedly had what they called weapons of mass destruction, missiles, bombs, and poison weapons and so forth. And he was known to support terrorists. And so what he said to the nation was, we're going to invade Iraq. We're going to take him out. We're going to get rid of those missiles, those WMDs. And the great majority of the country was all in favor of that at the time. The information they had, quite frankly, was faulty. Turned out we did invade Iraq and we got rid of Saddam Hussein. However, there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. So the decision was based on information that was not correct. And so what a futurist needs to do as best they can, and you can't be perfect at this, is you need to be able to chart, get as much data as you can, quantitative data, qualitative data, through a number of different ways. And I know I went over this already. I did. I remember now. So one thing you're going to need to be able to do in a couple of weeks is decide which of these bullets you're going to use. Are you going to use study groups? Are you going to use focus groups, experts, panel discussions, field trips? You're going to look at graph trends. You're all going to do a SWOT analysis and a root cause identification, which I know I went over. I think I skipped over, actually. A study group is what it sounds like. I've gone over this. Focus group is a little different from a study group. A focus group is where you're looking for input from a broad range of stakeholders to hear each other's and bounce each other's opinions off each other, and hopefully come up with a synthesis of some ideas that might lead to a purpose. Experts are experts, and again, experts can be wrong. Demographers are usually experts that principals bring in. Demographers going to come in and say, okay, the percentage of ENL children last year was 3% of the population. This year it's 6%, and next year it will be 8%. Demographers looking at the trend. Okay, and then that obviously leads to a conversation about, well, if we're moving in that kind of direction, what does that mean? What does that suggest? What should we do to accommodate that trend one way or the other? And the experts will do that. Another one that isn't brought in very often, and sometimes I wish it were, would be that world out there person who can tell you about the economy. How much money do we have? How many jobs do we have? What kinds of jobs do we have? Okay, all that kind of comes into bear because decisions you're going to make are going to cost resources, not necessarily money specifically, but resources as in time and expertise, as well as money and material. And so all of that, I was in charge of, I was assistant superintendent for instruction. I ran a huge group for 2 years about the technology plan we were trying to generate. And in the end, we came up with a pretty sophisticated plan for technology. And it was going to be a lot of computers in a lot of places. And I was at a loss for a moment. I really didn't know how to approach that. So I went to the business assistant superintendent, and he said, yeah, we can do that. Well, instead of buying the computers, because we all know computers are obsolete as soon as they walk out the door, we'll lease them. It'll be a lot cheaper, and we can keep up to date on things. So I'm making up the number. So let's say the price was $5 million across 10 years. I'm making up the date and the money expenditure. So I'm trying to get the board to pay attention to this. And one board member came up to me and he says, I won't give you the exact language he told me, basically said, there isn't any way I'm voting for that. So I wanted to give him some gas on that, but you don't give board members gas unless you think they'll change their mind. This man was not about to change his mind. So I said, so you're not willing to spend the money on technology? It's not that kind of money. Well, it doesn't mean, by the way, he was outvoted. But when you have that kind of majority, and politically speaking, you need to have some plan Bs in your pocket to move along. So he wasn't paying attention to what the experts were telling us. And again, panel discussions, field trips we talked about before. The trends are interesting. A trend, it's a little example of a graph. We usually see trends always going in one direction. They don't always go in one direction. Okay. I think the COVID crisis gave us a good example of what that was about. Attendance rates, dropouts, those kinds of things, or usually indicate some sort of hidden or not so hidden message or messages that you need to discern. Now, what I'm asking you is, not today, is what would you use? Which of those methods would you use to make sure you had enough information to approach your needs for your E&L babies? What would you need to know? Who would you ask? How would you do that? Okay. And then you go over to what you should do is do what was called a SWOT analysis. SWOT is a acronym. You probably have used it in other courses, I presume. No, but not always, I've begun to find out. It stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It enables us to get at root cause issues, which is really what we're driving at, in order to generate a purpose by way of goals we mean to put together. This is how you run a SWOT. And you would do this actually in your plan, but don't worry about it today. So I'm making this up. This is just a made up thing. Suppose you had a group and the group said, yeah, we have a strong community with pro-educational values. That's a strength. But our weakness is we're poor. And by the way, there'd be more than one fact here. I'm just using this for simplicity. And so we're threatened, I'm going clockwise, by school leaders or teachers who need to be replaced to make the programs better. That's a threat. Or you're threatened that the charter schools are taking over, or that people are moving out. Those are all threats to the health of the school. Now, the opportunities, another word for opportunities is probably goals, where you can use ways to get information from people so you can get them to recommit, he shouted, to public schooling excellence. So you use it. So what you're going to do here is you're going to use your information gathering activities. You're going to always, if you ever do this with your classes or with your faculty, you always insist on objective evidence. This is not just opinions here. These are facts. Okay? You try to get consensus, not always possible, at least the majority. And then you try to identify what else you need to know. Somebody said that in their discussion. It might have been Marlene, but I'm not sure. He said, you need to find out what it is that you don't know, that you don't know. And that leads you to root causes. Done the SWOT analysis. You've looked at all this other information purportedly. And now what you're going to do is use some sort of way to squeeze this piece down to some root cause issues. Okay? And the technique I show you here briefly is what's called the 5 why. I may have mentioned this already, where if you ask the proper kind of why question 5 times, you'll get to the root cause. So if you say, Johnny, why did you hit Mary? Because she made me mad. Why did she make you mad? Because she stuck her tongue out at me. Why did the fact that she stuck her tongue out at you make you mad? That makes me angry. Why does it make you angry? Because my big brother does it to me all the time. That's the root cause. He's thinking about his big brother. Why were you late, Mary? I was late because the clock didn't go off. I think I used this with you already. You go through the 5 whys, you get to the fact that our family was having another family argument, and nobody was setting anybody's clock, and the kid was suffering for that. That was the reason why this child was late. Why are the E&L parents not coming in for parent conferences? Practice that with somebody. You get to you think you know what the root causes are. You probably do, but you may not know all of them. In the end, what you need to do in this phase, in this type 1, is to get to 3 or 4 good, real, valid, he shouted, root causes. These are some examples. I'm skipping that. And so in type 1 futuring, it's a reasoned, logical analysis. It's not creativity. It's not saying, let's make the flower purple today. It's basically left brain information gathering, so you can begin to narrow down where you're taking things and where you need to get more research. If you were really doing your plan, then you would bring in experts, bring in demographers and professors and so forth to help you do this. But all I'm doing is say, this is what I would do in terms of my needs assessment to move through that part of the plan. Again, I'm going to give you more with that now. I'm just trying to get you to think about how we're going to approach this. That brings us to type 2. Type 2 is two-dimensional cause and effect. If somebody punches me in the nose, my nose bleeds. The cause of my bloody nose is somebody punched me in the nose. What are the other effects that will come out of that? I might punch that person in the nose. You might have a fight. You might get all suspended. All those are effects of the original cause. It's a natural progression of information gathering, and it's simple. The phrase I always use, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you in a different way in a minute, is as if you were throwing a rock in a puddle or a rock into a pond and the ripples come out. The surface ripples, not the ones underneath, the surface ripples. Why is there ripples in the pond? Because Johnny threw a rock in the middle of the pond. Fair enough? So what you're doing now is you're looking at simple if-then. If this happens, then that happens. Several of you talked about the change in the reading program in the city. If you impose, notice my verb, a reading program that didn't sound like it was particularly the product of a collective a mindset conversation or analyses, that some people said, hear ye, we will change the program from this to this, then what are the consequences of that? So what you're doing here is you're beginning to systematize the dialogue. And you're beginning to think a little bit creatively, but not all that much. And really what we're trying to do here is to generate momentum for deeper thinking. Okay? And that brings us to 2 strategies. I'm going to go through them kind of quickly because we're going to revisit these in a few weeks, less than a few weeks. I'm giving you 2 right now. One is called a futures wheel, and I'll send you a link about that, futures wheel link. And here is an example of a futures wheel. So think of the center as where the rock went. So I put a future here. Demographic shifts point to widening gaps in achievement. You see that future coming. It's an emerging future. And then the next question is, what are the ripple effects? Watch my cursor move, how does this cause affect this? How does this effect cause that? How does this effect cause that? It is not, he shouted, it is not a brainstorm. Any old idea is okay, the Martians are coming. No, it is a logical progression of how you see a potential future. Futures, people sometimes have trouble realizing there's more than one future available to us. And so the next piece of it is, let's see what the ripple effects may be. And that's what a futures wheel does. It very nicely lays out futures wheel. Now, what I usually do with my students is I'll say, okay, write them down, like the way it looks right there, so to speak, filling in all the circles. Okay, and I'm skipping that because I like the way it looks. And then I'm going to ask people what they think is most probably going to happen. The gaps are going to continue. The general education kids are going to move out. There's going to be resentment about how we throw services to the E&L babies. These are not futures that are foreign to you. You know these things typically happen. Those are probable futures. They're not necessarily preferable ones, though, are they? Now, another way to do this is to continue on the type 2 premise, is to go with cross-impact matrix, which is a fancy word for a chart, okay? Here, you project the outcomes of probable futures against other criteria, okay? And what this does for you edufuturists, remember, you're going to have a skill set that nobody else is going to have in your school system, in your school building. I promise. I promise that. Money back on this. What you're going to do is you're going to enable futurists, you and people whom you're going to train to be futurists in a couple of weeks, to identify the extent to which these impacts are influenced by other factors, on the extent to which there are sometimes what we call not sometimes, they're always what we call secondary and tertiary, and even past that, consequences of that first rock in the puddle. So you see a little model here. Here's a better model in this one. So a probable future is, and I'm making this up, achievement levels are static. A probable future is teacher dissatisfaction with professional development. A probable future is there's a clamor for technology not met because of budgetary issues. Well, who's affected by those probable futures? Students, parents, teachers, and the shared vision. How is that affected? I'm only going to do one box just to show you. So if achievement levels are static, how does that impact parents? What will parents do? So one probable future that comes from that is the parents will be concerned about their children's growth. And they'll be concerned about their property values too, potentially. If teachers are dissatisfied with their professional development, it's going to mean that there's a miss or there's no alignment with the school's vision, if there is one to begin with, which leads to haphazard or faulty teacher development. And so you can see the probable futures go down the left side of the column, and then you identify people, places, and things that could be affected by those futures. And then you project what they mean. Now, again, this is not a brainstorm, he shouted. You've already done a lot of homework on what your community is about, what your school is about. So you can make some pretty reasonable conclusions about what those futures may be. This is a critical piece here. So if I go back to, I use a futures wheel first, then I go over to my matrix after you've completed the futures, after you've completed the futures wheel, you've got your arms around a lot of good ideas here. A lot of futures that seem like they're at the very least probable. And then you roll to the next place. Go to three-dimensional. What's the story this could create? Now, there's lots of ways to do three-dimensional. What I'm going to do is show you this bottom idea very briefly. I'll come back to this next week. Transformative scenario planning. You're going to write a story. What will the story look like if you're in a school where the principal knows what she wants, but the faculty doesn't agree with her? Where will you go with the school if the principal doesn't know how to go about doing anything, and the faculty or the community doesn't support intervention for ENL children? What will that story look like? Make up a story about that. What happens to those children? So we're going to skip over some of these. Some of these are pretty interesting ideas, actually, but just very simply, we're going to stop here at page 93. And we're going to pick it up from scenario planning as the third type of futuring. So by the end of today, when I shut this video off, you will have seen, I won't say you will have learned, you will become familiar with, you will be able to recognize that there are three types of futuring. Really more, but for the moment, we'll go with three. Information gathering and purpose building. If-then thinking, two-dimensional thinking, and then the mother of all futuring strategy for, insofar as you're concerned, is scenario planning. But we're not done yet. We're getting there, but we're coming around the bend. Makes me think I should probably post this whole PowerPoint. So I'm going to post the whole PowerPoint, but for heaven's sakes, don't feel like you have to watch the whole PowerPoint. Go through it slowly. Skip over things that you don't feel the need to get. It's not as though I want you to memorize this thing, but I think you need it now. So I'm going to give it to you as soon as we hang up. And so what I've done with you today is I've talked about your assignment you just turned in. I mentioned the next assignment's coming up, and I'll give you a model on that. We'll do a optional business, optional office hour on that one. I'm telling you, we have a simulation just about ready to start with you folks, in which you'll be playing, using this information, these skills in a different kind of way among yourselves. And I talked about what a decision may look like. And then I talked about how you can apply futuring skills, 3 types of futuring skills in a concerted, structured kind of way to get everybody to start thinking future. Enough said. And with that, I'm shutting things off. Again, if you have any questions or comments or issues, feel free to ask. And you know what your discussion question assignments are for next week too.